Welcome to our channel, Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. From daring jewel heists to mysterious legends, every video uncovers the secrets hidden in the shadows. Stay with us, because here, every crime tells a story. On a warm night in Portugal, a family's holiday turned into every parent's worst nightmare. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from her bed while her parents dined just steps away. No screams, no struggle. She was simply gone. What followed became one of the most famous missing child cases in the world. The frantic search, the police investigation, the endless headlines, and still no clear answers. In this video, we'll uncover the night it all began, the mistakes that changed the investigation forever, and why, even after all these years, the world still asks the same haunting question. What really happened to Madeleine McCann? The night was calm in Praia da Luz, a small holiday town in Portugal, known for its peaceful beaches and quiet streets. Families filled the resorts, enjoying the warm evenings, the sound of waves, and the glow of street lamps. Among those families were the McCanns, a British couple with 3 children, including their eldest daughter, Madeleine. The family had chosen the Ocean Club Resort for their holiday. It was a place filled with tennis courts, pools, and apartments where families could relax. The McCanns spent their days playing with their children, walking along the beach, and having dinner with friends. Madeleine, just 3 years old, was full of energy. With her bright eyes and curious nature, she captured the attention of everyone around her. She loved to play, laugh, and explore. On May 3, 2007, the day seemed ordinary at first. The family spent time by the pool, walked to the beach, and enjoyed the sunshine. That evening, the McCanns planned to have dinner with their friends at a nearby restaurant. It was just a short walk away from their apartment. The group of friends often dined together, taking turns to check on their children who were asleep in their rooms. This routine had become normal during the holiday. At around 8:30 p.m., the children were put to bed. Madeleine lay in her pink pajamas next to her younger twin siblings. Her parents kissed her goodnight, leaving the apartment door slightly open. Then they walked to the restaurant, only about 100 meters away, where they could still see parts of the apartment from the terrace. The group settled into their meal, enjoying wine and conversation. Every 20 to 30 minutes, one parent from the group would leave to check on the children. It was their system, one they felt safe using because of the short distance. At 9:05 p.m., Madeleine's father, Jerry McCann, returned to the apartment. He looked in on the children. All 3 were asleep, peaceful and safe. He quietly left, returning to dinner. Nothing seemed unusual. At 9:30 p.m., another friend from the group checked the apartment. Again, everything seemed fine. The twins slept, the door was slightly open, and silence filled the room. But by 10 p.m., everything changed. Kate McCann, Madeleine's mother, walked back to the apartment for her turn to check. As she entered, she immediately felt something was wrong. The bedroom door was wider open than before. A chill ran through her. She stepped inside, and her heart dropped. Madeleine's bed was empty. The pink blanket was pushed aside. The window was open, the shutters raised. Kate rushed around the room, searching desperately, calling her daughter's name. But there was no answer. Panic gripped her chest. She ran back to the restaurant, shouting, "Madeleine's gone! Someone's taken her!" Chaos erupted. Friends and staff rushed toward the apartment. People shouted Madeleine's name through the dark streets, searching every corner, every alley. Lights flickered on as neighbors joined the frantic search. The police were called, but in those first moments, the resort itself became a storm of confusion. Inside the apartment, detectives later noted the window was open, the curtains blowing in the night breeze. The shutters, heavy and difficult to lift, were raised. It looked as though someone had entered or exited through that way. The hours dragged on with no sign of the child. By midnight, police patrols searched the beach, the streets, and the nearby roads. Volunteers formed lines, sweeping through fields and empty lots. But the little girl was gone. News spread quickly through the resort. Tourists whispered in shock. A missing child in such a quiet town was unthinkable. Parents held their children tighter. Rumors filled the air. Some said a stranger had been seen nearby. Others swore they had heard unusual noises earlier in the evening. Nothing was certain, only that Madeleine had vanished. Back in the apartment, Kate sat holding Madeleine's toy, tears streaming down her face. Jerry spoke with the police, his voice breaking with urgency. Their friends hovered helplessly, guilt pressing on them. They had all trusted the routine, believed the children were safe so close by. But now, the unimaginable had happened. By morning, the case was already national news. Reporters gathered outside the resort, cameras flashing, journalists demanding answers. Posters with Madeleine's face were printed, showing her bright smile and distinctive eye, a mark in her iris that made her instantly recognizable. The Portuguese police began their investigation, but questions hung heavy. Had someone entered through the window and taken her? Was it possible she had wandered off on her own? Or was it something more complex, something planned? As the search widened, more people recalled strange things from the days before. Some said they had seen a man loitering near the apartments watching. Others spoke of a suspicious car parked nearby. Small details that had once seemed meaningless now carried the weight of fear. For the McCanns, the hours turned into days, each moment filled with unbearable grief. They pleaded to the public, "Please, if anyone has our daughter, bring her back to us." Their words echoed across television screens, their faces desperate and broken. The town that had once been a holiday paradise was now filled with suspicion and sorrow. The beach, once filled with laughter, now stood silent. The Ocean Club Resort, once a place of comfort, was marked forever by the disappearance of a little girl. And while the world watched, one haunting question remained unanswered. What really happened to Madeleine McCann on that night she vanished? The morning after Madeleine vanished, the resort no longer looked like a holiday paradise. Police cars lined the streets, officers moved from apartment to apartment, and families who had come for sunshine now whispered in fear. The news had spread. Quickly, a little British girl had disappeared in the night. Detectives entered apartment 5A, the McCanns' rented unit, sealing it off as a crime scene. The open window, the curtains fluttering in the breeze, the shutters lifted. These were now treated as possible evidence. Forensics searched for fingerprints, footprints, or any trace of who might have entered. They dusted the windowsill and the walls, took photographs of the bedding, and measured the scratches on the shutters. But early mistakes were already happening. Curious neighbors and staff had entered the apartment the night before during the frantic search, leaving traces of their own. Evidence was easily disturbed. What could have been a sealed crime scene had already been touched by many. This would later become one of the most controversial points in the investigation. Outside, volunteers gathered in groups, searching the beaches, the cliffs, and the winding streets. They called out Madeleine's name, their voices echoing through the village. Police dogs were brought in, sniffing around the apartment and nearby roads, but they found nothing clear. The trail was already fading. At the police station, detectives questioned Jerry and Kate McCann. Their faces were pale, their voices shaky. Jerry repeated what he had seen when he checked at 9:05, Madeleine asleep with her siblings. Kate described the horror of finding the bed empty at 10:00. They explained their routine of dining with friends and checking on the children every half hour. To them, it had felt safe. The detectives listened, taking notes. Some sympathized. understanding how parents might believe it was fine to be so close. Others questioned the decision. Why leave such young children alone even for minutes? That doubt began quietly, but it would later grow louder, especially in the media. Meanwhile, witnesses came forward. A British tourist said she had seen a man carrying a small child wrapped in a blanket around 10 p.m., not far from the apartment. At first, she thought it was just a father carrying his daughter, but after hearing the news, she wondered if it had been Madeleine. Her statement became one of the most discussed clues in the case. Another guest said he had noticed a man hanging around the apartment block days earlier, watching from the street. He seemed out of place, nervous, avoiding eye contact. His description was vague, but it added to the picture that someone might have been observing the family. As hours turned into days, the investigation widened. Borders were alerted, airports and ferry terminals were warned. Madeleine's face appeared everywhere, on posters, on television, on newspapers across Europe. Her distinctive eye feature, a small mark in her iris, was highlighted to make her instantly recognizable. The McCanns appeared before cameras, their voices breaking as they pleaded, "Madeleine is a beautiful, bright little girl. We love her dearly. Please, if anyone knows anything, bring her back." Their pain was clear, their desperation raw. Millions watching across the world felt sympathy, anger, and fear. But despite the massive attention, there were no solid leads. Portuguese. Police began to explore different theories. Was it an abduction by a stranger? Had someone entered the apartment to take her? Or was it possible that Madeleine had wandered out herself? Some officers believed the open window and lifted shutters suggested an intruder. Others questioned whether they had been staged. Theories multiplied. Some suggested child traffickers, pointing to reports of suspicious cars seen near the resort. Others believed it was a crime of opportunity, a passerby who noticed the open patio door and acted quickly. Each possibility was investigated, but no clear path emerged. For the McCann family, every moment felt endless. Kate clutched Madeleine's toy, refusing to let it out of her sight. Jerry worked tirelessly with police, but also reached out to international organizations asking for help. Friends supported them, but the burden was unbearable. They had come for a holiday. Now, they were living a nightmare. Back at the Ocean Club, tourists who had once enjoyed laughter-filled dinners now ate in silence. Parents no longer left their children alone, even for a moment. The little playground stood empty, the pool quiet. The disappearance had cast a shadow over the entire resort. On the fifth day, something unusual happened. A local reported seeing a man acting suspiciously in the nearby town. He seemed to match the earlier descriptions, a thin figure, dark hair, carrying something at night. Police chased the lead, but once again, it led nowhere. The investigation faced pressure from every direction. The British media criticized the Portuguese police for moving too slowly. Portuguese officials, in turn, complained about the massive attention complicating their work. Tensions between the two countries' forces grew, and through it all, Madeleine remained missing. Detective Gonçalo Amaral, who was leading the Portuguese team, began to develop doubts. He wondered if the story of abduction was the only explanation. Could something else have happened inside the apartment? His questions were quiet at first, but they planted seeds that would later become storms of controversy. Meanwhile, the McCanns held firm. They believed their daughter had been taken, and they would not give up searching. They launched a campaign, speaking to the press daily, holding up Madeleine's photo and begging for information. The days turned into weeks. The town of Praia da Luz remained filled with posters, police patrols, and reporters. The quiet village had become the center of one of the most intense searches in modern history. But still, no trace of the little girl was found. No fingerprints, no ransom note, no voice on the phone. Only silence, and with each passing day, the mystery deepened. The search for Madeleine continued day after day, But with no breakthrough, frustration began to grow. Praia da Luz no longer felt like a calm tourist town. It was now filled with police, journalists, and families carrying missing posters. The once sunny streets seemed heavy with fear and suspicion. Everywhere, Madeleine's face appeared. On lampposts, shop windows, car windows. Her distinctive eye, with the mark in her iris, became the detail that everyone looked for. Police appealed to the public, saying, "Look carefully, she could be anywhere." The McCanns worked tirelessly. Jerry made phone calls to officials in Britain, asking for more resources. Kate walked the streets, speaking to locals, begging them not to stop searching. They believed their daughter was alive, and they would not let her story fade. Meanwhile, detectives chased leads across Portugal and beyond. A man reported seeing a child like Madeleine at a gas station. Another claimed he saw a family boarding a ferry with a girl who resembled her. Each tip was investigated, but each ended in disappointment. Police. Dogs were brought into the case. Specially trained British dogs searched the apartment and surrounding areas. The results shocked many. One dog signaled at the scent of blood near the apartment, while another signaled at the scent of a body behind the sofa and inside the trunk. Of a rental car the McCanns had used weeks after Madeleine's disappearance. These signals were not proof, but raised troubling questions. The Portuguese police began to shift their focus. Until then, the theory of abduction had dominated. But now doubts crept in. Could Madeleine have died inside the apartment? Could her parents have been involved? Detective Gonçalo Amaral leaned heavily on this theory. He argued that the signs pointed to something happening inside the flat, not outside. The idea that a stranger broke in, lifted heavy shutters, and carried off a child without being seen seemed unlikely to him. Instead, he began to suspect an accident covered up as something else. This change in direction divided opinion sharply. Some officers agreed with Amaral, while others believed strongly that Madeleine had been abducted. The public, too, became divided. Many felt sympathy for the McCanns, believing no parent would ever harm their own child. But whispers grew louder. What if the truth was not what it seemed? The McCanns were devastated by these suspicions. They denied them completely, insisting that Madeleine had been taken by someone outside. Jerry told reporters, "We had nothing to do with our daughter's disappearance. We will never stop looking for her." Kate, often holding Madeleine's toy in her hand, pleaded with the world not to believe false accusations. The media frenzy exploded. British newspapers filled with headlines, some supporting the family, others accusing them. Portuguese papers published leaked details of the investigation, making the family's pain even worse. Reporters followed them everywhere, cameras flashing in their faces as they tried to keep searching for their daughter. Through all of this, small details continued to surface. Several people claimed to have seen suspicious men near the apartment days before Madeleine vanished. One described a man acting like he was watching the building. Another remembered a group of men going door to door, offering fake charity collections. Could one of these sightings be the abductor? Or were they distractions that led nowhere? Interpol and Europol also became involved. Alerts were sent across Europe and North Africa. Portugal's proximity to Morocco raised concerns that Madeleine could have been smuggled out quickly. Some witnesses even claimed to have seen a blonde child in Moroccan towns. These reports brought fresh hope, but when checked, each turned out to be mistaken identity. As the weeks turned into months, the case only grew more confusing. The police investigation was strained, caught between two competing theories: abduction versus parental involvement. Resources were stretched, and the international attention made every step harder. In the middle of it all stood the McCanns. They launched the Find Madeleine campaign, raising funds to support the search. Celebrities, politicians, and ordinary people contributed. Posters were printed in dozens of languages. The case had become global, one of the most widely covered disappearances in modern times. But with no clear answers, the weight of suspicion continued. In September 2007, 4 months after Madeleine disappeared, Portuguese police officially named Jerry and Kate McCann as arguidos, formal suspects. The announcement shocked the world. Cameras swarmed them as they left the station, their faces pale and exhausted. Kate later described the moment as crushing. She said she felt accused not only of losing her child but of harming her. Jerry called it unimaginable cruelty. Still, they returned to Britain, continuing to campaign for Madeleine's return, refusing to give up. Back in Portugal, the investigation slowed. With limited evidence, detectives struggled. The dog signals were questioned by experts, some saying they were unreliable without supporting proof. The forensics taken from the apartment showed nothing conclusive. And without a body, there was no way to prove any theory. By the end of the year, the case was at a standstill. Madeleine was still missing, the McCanns were under suspicion, and the world was left divided. Some believed the parents' pain, others believed the police doubts. But one thing was certain: a little girl had vanished into the night, and no one knew where she was. And behind the silence of unanswered questions, darker possibilities waited to be uncovered. The case of Madeleine McCann had now grown into something far bigger than anyone expected. What began as a missing child investigation in a quiet holiday town was now one of the most talked-about mysteries in the world. Every newspaper, every television channel, every online forum carried her name. And yet, despite the enormous attention, there were still no answers. The Portuguese police remained divided. Some detectives still believed in the abduction theory, pointing to the open window, the lifted shutters, and the tourist who claimed she saw a man carrying a child that night. Others, including Detective Gonçalo Amaral, leaned heavily on the idea that something had happened inside the apartment and that the parents knew more than they were saying. The McCanns returned to Britain, but the storm followed them. Crowds of reporters waited outside their home every day. Headlines shouted conflicting claims. Some painted them as grieving parents, others as possible suspects. The pressure was unbearable, yet they kept their focus on one goal: finding Madeleine D. Portugal Amaral published his suspicions openly. He claimed the evidence suggested Madeleine had died accidentally and that her parents had covered it up. His theory caused outrage. The McCanns sued him for defamation, insisting he had no proof and was only harming their search for the truth. The legal battle itself became news, but it did nothing to bring Madeleine home. Meanwhile, private investigators were hired by the McCanns to keep searching beyond the official police work. These investigators traveled to Morocco, Spain, and other countries where sightings had been reported. They followed every lead, but again and again they returned empty-handed. In one instance, a woman in Morocco claimed she saw a blonde girl being carried on a street market. Her description sounded strikingly similar to Madeleine. For a moment, hope returned. But when investigators checked, the girl turned out to be another child, safe with her family. The disappointment was crushing. Despite so many false alarms, the McCanns refused to give up. They launched an international campaign, appearing on television shows, speaking at events, and releasing new appeals on what would have been Madeleine's birthdays. The slogan, "Don't give up on me," became part of the posters, a heartbreaking reminder that a little girl was still missing. But in the background, suspicion remained. The police dog's signals had never been fully explained. Forensics had raised questions, though none had given answers. Some believed the focus on the parents had damaged the investigation, taking attention away from other suspects. Others argued it was necessary to consider every possibility. In July 2008, more than a year after Madeleine vanished, the Portuguese authorities closed their investigation, admitting they had no proof against anyone. The McCanns were cleared of their arguido status. The official file was shelved, but the mystery remained unsolved. For the world, it felt like a story without an ending. The media coverage slowed, but every few months, new rumors would spark interest again. A reported sighting here, a new theory there. It kept the case alive, but never brought closure. Years passed. The twins grew older, carrying the absence of their sister with them. Jerry and Kate continued their campaign, raising funds to support private searches. They worked with organizations to fight child exploitation, using Madeleine's name as a symbol of hope. But their own hearts carried the weight of never knowing. In 2011, the British government agreed to review the case. Scotland Yard launched Operation Grange, re-examining every piece of evidence. Detectives sifted through thousands of documents, re-interviewed witnesses, and followed old and new leads. For the McCanns, it was another chance, another hope that answers might finally come. Operation Grange raised new theories. They believed it was possible Madeleine had been taken by a stranger during a burglary gone wrong. They also looked into reports of men seen watching the apartment block before the night she disappeared. The idea of child traffickers was also considered. The investigation brought fresh energy, but again, no breakthrough. Every anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance brought renewed attention. Vigils were held, candles lit, prayers said. Her face, once that of a playful 3-year-old, was digitally aged to show what she might look like years later. The images were shared worldwide, a desperate attempt to keep her story alive. But time carried on. Each new clue seemed to fade into the same silence. For the McCanns, life was a strange balance between hope and grief. They celebrated birthdays, Christmases, and milestones with the twins while always leaving a place for Madeleine. Kate once said, "It's like carrying a wound that never heals." The case remained open, but answers seemed further away than ever. Some believed Madeleine was alive somewhere, waiting to be found. Others quietly feared the truth was darker, that she would never return. And through it all, one fact remained unshakable. On a calm evening in Praia da Luz, a little girl had vanished from her bed. No one saw it happen. No one stopped it. The silence that followed was filled with questions, doubts, and endless theories, but the truth, whatever it was, remained locked in the night she disappeared. Years had passed since the night Madeleine McCann vanished, yet her name never faded from public memory. Newspapers still printed her photo, television documentaries revisited the case, and her parents continued their search with tireless determination. But with every year, the question grew heavier. Where was Madeleine? Operation Grange, launched by Scotland Yard in 2011, tried to bring new light to the case. Detectives reviewed tens of thousands of documents, many of them overlooked in the chaotic early days. They created timelines, checked alibis, and built profiles of possible suspects. For a while, hope returned that a breakthrough might finally come. One major focus of the review was the man seen by a tourist carrying a child on the night of May 3, 2007. For years, this sighting was treated as the strongest clue. But after a long investigation, police discovered the man was actually another British holidaymaker carrying his own daughter back from the resort's crash. That sighting, once central to the abduction theory, was dismissed. It was a shocking turn that showed how much confusion had surrounded the case from the beginning. With that lead closed, detectives turned their attention to other suspicious figures. Reports of strange men hanging around the Ocean Club apartments before Madeleine's disappearance resurfaced. Several witnesses recalled being approached by men collecting for fake charities or watching the building. Scotland Yard believed these men might have been scouting the area, looking for opportunities. One theory suggested Madeleine could have been taken by a group involved in child trafficking. Portugal's coastline and proximity to Spain and North Africa made it possible for a child to be moved quickly across borders. Some witnesses had even claimed to see blonde children in Morocco, but none of those reports were ever confirmed. Meanwhile, Jerry and Kate McCann kept their campaign alive. They gave interviews, released statements on anniversaries, and maintained the Find Madeleine Fund. They worked with charities and pressed authorities not to let the case grow cold. For them, hope was the only way forward, but criticism continued. 2. Some accused them of living in the spotlight, others still whispered suspicions from the early investigation. Every move they made was judged. Despite the pain, they kept going, saying, "We have to do everything we can for our daughter." By 2013, Scotland Yard released computer-generated images of new suspects. They urged anyone who had been in Praia da Luz that week to come forward. Dozens of calls came in, but again, no decisive breakthrough. As the investigation stretched on, the media began to call it one of the most expensive missing child cases in history. Millions had been spent, and still no Madeleine. Critics asked if it was worth continuing. But for her parents, the answer was simple: yes. Then, in 2017, on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance, a new wave of attention arrived. Television specials revisited the case, showing the haunting timeline of that night. People across the world once again saw the photo of a smiling little girl with a mark in her eye, a face that had never been forgotten. But behind the public, appeals. Detectives were quietly following another lead. A new suspect had surfaced, a German man with a long criminal record, including crimes against children. He had lived in Portugal at the time of Madeleine's disappearance, not far from Praia da Luz. His name was Christian Bruckner. Bruckner had a history of burglary and violence. He also owned a camper van and a Jaguar car, both seen in the Algarve region during 2007. He had even spoken to friends about knowing the area well. When police dug deeper, they discovered disturbing evidence of his past crimes. He was already in prison in Germany for unrelated offenses when his name became linked to Madeleine. For investigators, he became a serious suspect. Phone records placed him in Praia da Luz on the very night Madeleine disappeared. At 9:10 p.m., shortly before Kate McCann discovered her daughter missing, Bruckner's phone had received a call near the Ocean Club. The discovery was chilling. For the first time in years, detectives felt they might be close to the truth. But questions remained. If Bruckner had taken Madeleine, where had he taken her? What had happened afterward? No body was found, no physical evidence directly tied him to her. Without those answers, the case could not be closed. The McCanns, while cautious, welcomed the focus on Bruckner. They issued a statement. "We will never give up hope of finding Madeleine alive, but whatever the outcome, we need to know the truth." For the public, the case once again burned into headlines. People debated endlessly. Was this finally the breakthrough or just another false hope? Through it all, the pain remained the same. Kate once described the feeling as living with a piece of your heart missing. Jerry spoke of the guilt that haunted him every day. They had trusted their system of checking the children, believing it was safe. But in that trust, their daughter had vanished. Operation Grange continued its work, chasing every new detail. Detectives searched areas linked to Bruckner, interviewed people who knew him, and studied his past crimes. The picture that emerged was dark, a man capable of terrible things. But without Madeleine, without final proof, the case remained a haunting mystery. The years stretched on. Birthdays passed. Anniversaries came and went. Each one brought fresh appeals, fresh photos, and fresh questions, and always the same silence. A silence that carried across borders, across oceans, across time itself. Madeleine's story was no longer just about one child. It had become a symbol of every missing child, every unanswered question, every family left searching. But in the shadows of that symbol, one chilling fact remained. A little girl had vanished in the night, and no one yet knew the full truth of what happened. The name Christian Bruckner now dominated the Madeleine McCann investigation. After years of uncertainty, detectives finally had a suspect who seemed to fit too many details to ignore. He had lived in the Algarve at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. He had a violent criminal history, and his phone had been active near the Ocean Club on the exact night she vanished. German authorities opened their own investigation, working closely with British and Portuguese police. They declared publicly in 2020 that they believed Madeleine was dead and that Bruckner was responsible. For the first time in 13 years, officials spoke with confidence about a suspect. But there was still a problem: evidence. There was no body, no DNA, no photograph or video, no direct proof tying him to Madeleine. The case rested on circumstantial details: phone records, his past crimes, his presence in the area, and his suspicious behavior. Investigators dug into his life. They discovered he had lived in a van, often camping near Praia da Luz. Witnesses recalled seeing his camper van near the resort. Others remembered a man like him watching children at beaches and playgrounds. His past crimes painted him as dangerous, especially toward children. Police also uncovered disturbing items from his past: images, tapes, and notes that hinted at his dark interests. He had been convicted of abusing children before. He had committed violent assaults. He had broken into homes. To investigators, he seemed capable of taking a child from her bed. Yet without Madeleine herself, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. For Jerry and Kate McCann, the news about Bruckner was both hopeful and crushing. Hopeful because after so many years, someone might finally be held responsible. Crushing because German prosecutors publicly said they believed Madeleine was no longer alive. For parents who had never given up hope, those words were like another wound. They responded carefully, saying, "We need evidence. Until then, we will not give up hope." The investigation into Bruckner stretched across countries. Police searched properties he had once lived in, digging through gardens and empty lots. In one area in Germany, they even searched a garden linked to him, digging for days. Rumors spread that they were looking for Madeleine's remains. Nothing was found. The press followed every move. Headlines called him the prime suspect, the predator, the drifter. But for the public, it was another chapter of uncertainty. Would this be the man who finally answered the question? Or would it end like all the other leads, empty? Meanwhile, theories continued to swirl. Some investigators still believed in a burglary gone wrong. Others held to the idea of organized trafficking. Some even questioned whether Bruckner acted alone or was part of something bigger. The mystery remained unsolved. Despite this, Operation Grange continued its work. Though its funding had been reduced, detectives pressed on, hoping that one more piece of evidence could make the difference. They re-examined phone data, traced movements of vehicles, and interviewed people who had once been close to Bruckner. Some described him as unpredictable, angry, and cruel. Others said he was secretive, always hiding things. One acquaintance claimed he bragged about knowing what happened to that British girl. But without proof, these words were only words. Back in Britain, Madeleine's case remained a constant presence. Each year on the anniversary of her disappearance, the McCanns released a statement. They spoke of their love, their hope, and their endless search. They thanked people around the world for keeping Madeleine in their hearts. And they asked for privacy, as the pain never lessened. Kate once wrote, "There is no closure without knowing. You can't grieve, you can't move on, you just wait." And that was what they did. Wait. In 2022, the Portuguese authorities declared Christian Bruckner an official suspect. It was the first time in years anyone had carried that title. The move gave new energy to the investigation, but again, the question remained. Would there ever be enough evidence to bring him to trial? Public opinion was divided. Some believed strongly that Bruckner was guilty, pointing to his record and his presence in Praia da Luz. Others argued that too many questions remained, that the police were desperate for an answer and had fixed. On him because the world demanded closure. The truth was that no one knew. For the McCanns, life carried on in a strange silence. The twins grew into teenagers. Birthdays were celebrated with joy for them and sorrow for the one who was missing. Madeleine's room remained as it had been, waiting for her return. The family lived with the ache of absence, never knowing if she would walk back through the door, and around the world, people still remembered. Some whispered that one day, Madeleine would be found alive, living under another name, unaware of who she truly was. Others feared she had been lost forever. In the night she vanished. The case had become more than a mystery. It was a mirror of human hope, grief, and the desperate need for answers. And through it all, one truth never changed. A little girl had vanished from her bed, and no one could say, even after so many years, exactly what had happened. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann had become one of the most famous mysteries in the world. From the night she vanished in 2007 to the latest investigations many years later, her story had stretched across continents, courtrooms, and countless headlines. And yet the answer everyone searched for, the truth of what really happened, remained hidden. Christian Bruckner, the German man named as a prime suspect, continued to sit in prison for unrelated crimes. German authorities said they believed he was responsible for Madeleine's disappearance, but without a body or direct evidence, their case remained unfinished. He denied involvement, sometimes mocking the investigation. His words only added to the anger of those who wanted justice. For Jerry and Kate McCann, the years were marked by an endless cycle of hope and despair. Each new lead brought a flicker of light, and each disappointment pushed them back into darkness. They spoke of living in limbo, unable to move forward, unable to let go. Madeleine's face was everywhere in their home, photos on the walls, her room kept ready, her toys preserved. To them, she was always part of the family, always loved, always missed. Operation Grange, the British investigation, slowly reduced in size as funding declined. Detectives admitted privately that unless something new appeared, an eyewitness, a confession, or a discovery, it would be nearly impossible to solve. But officially, the case remained open. Madeleine's file was never closed. Around the world, her story touched people in a way few others had. It was not just about a missing child, it was about the fear that something so unthinkable could happen to anyone, anywhere. Parents who saw her photo thought of their own children. Families lit candles. Strangers prayed. She became a symbol of loss and of hope, both at the same time. Theories continued to swirl, even after so many years. Some believed Madeleine had been taken by traffickers and was still alive somewhere, her identity hidden. Others believed she had died that very night and the truth had been covered up. Still others believed Bruckner had been the one, but proof would never come. For the McCanns, the search became part of their lives. They built a charity to help find missing children. They gave interviews and wrote books, telling their story to keep Madeleine's name alive. Every May 3rd, they released a statement. Some years it was filled with cautious hope. Other years it carried the heavy words of grief. But always it carried the same message. They would never give up. Kate once wrote, "Until we know, we will never stop. We will keep looking for Madeleine for as long as it takes." Even now, her face appears on posters, websites, and campaigns. Digital images show what she might look like as a teenager and now as a young adult. Her eyes, especially the mark in her iris, remain the key detail, the one thing that never changes. But despite the images, despite the campaigns, despite the investigations that spanned more than a decade, no one has been able to bring Madeleine home. The case has left behind questions that may never be answered. Did Bruckner take her, as German police believe? Was it someone else entirely? Someone never caught? Was she moved across borders, hidden in another country? Or did something else happen that night? something even darker. Each theory carries weight. Each has holes. And so, the mystery of Madeleine McCann lives on. For her parents, the story is not about theories or suspects. It is about a little girl with bright eyes, pink pajamas, and a smile that filled their lives with joy. For them, she is not a headline, not a mystery. She is their daughter. And until the day comes when the truth is finally uncovered, they will hold on to hope. Hope that the silence will break. Hope that the doors will open. Hope that the world will know what happened on that night in Praia da Luz. Because behind the news, behind the investigations, and behind the endless debates, one simple truth remains. Madeleine McCann vanished in the night, and the world is still waiting for the answer. You've just seen another chilling story from the world of true crime, but there are many more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe to Crime Loom, and join us as we unravel more heists, mysteries, and untold legends. Don't miss what's coming next, because in the world of crime, the truth is always stranger than fiction.